Hello, this is Dr. A, and welcome back to another instalment of Amy in an Ami. Today, we're going to be going through rather a long journey, a journey which was supposed to only be a couple of hours long, but in total ended up being over 200 miles and nearly 8 hours in the cab in an old classic Citroen car. Not ideal, not something we want to repeat. We don't have the full 8-hour journey here. The camera battery, first of all, ran out of memory. I stupidly forgot to delete all the previous files on there, so we didn't capture the first part of the journey. And then after a couple of hours filming, the batteries ran out. So you haven't got the full 8 hours, be thankful for that. And this is a rather condensed version of this journey. So we set out yesterday after getting the Ami back from the garage to give her a bit of a road test, and we thought we'd go to a castle called Carreg Cennen, which is over by Llandilio in South Wales, over towards Swansea. We headed up through the Brecon Beacons, right the way over, and this is the beginning of the journey. What we've got here, the rain's starting to come in a little bit, and I left this clip in because in a moment you'll see some black smoke to the side. This is the first fire we encountered this day. The builders there were just burning some rubbish. The one later on in the day happened to be a vehicle on fire and actually caused us a 3-hour delay getting home when we were in Abergavenny, just up the road. Should have been a much shorter journey than that, and as you can imagine, by the time we got back, we were absolutely exhausted. So I left this in just as a kind of fun poke at the fact that we encountered 2 fires in the same day. So the weather's obviously come in a little bit here, and this is typical of Wales. You can have rain here. In 5 minutes' time, you'll have bright sunshine, and then you'll be back to rain and cloud, and it's completely changeable. So bear that in mind if you're ever going out around here. You can't predict what it's going to do. So I'm going to leave the journey to carry on for a moment, and we're going to skip onto the A40. We went over the top where the mountain is, but as I say, didn't manage to record that bit, so we skip straight to the A40. So as I say, I didn't manage to capture the part going over the mountain. If you do want to see that, if you take a look at some of the Himalayan videos that Avid's done, he's done that route a couple of times. It's exactly the same route that we took over it in the Ami. The only difference was there was a cycle race going on, and we actually got some really lovely facial expressions of people, smiles, giggles, thumbs up, all kinds of things, because it's a classic car and they weren't... They were struggling up those hills, and I completely have every respect for them, that I couldn't cycle up the steepness of that hill, and it was lovely to see the gestures and the smiles and the thumbs up that we were getting from them. So anyone that we did see there, if you happen to be watching this, well done, you were doing a great job. But if you do want to see that part, not the cycle race, if you do want to see the mountain going over the top there, take a look at Avid's Himalayan videos. And there's plenty of shots of that. It is a beautiful ride. we're just coming in here to Senny Bridge. There's a large army training barracks, military training grounds just behind here, so lots of people from the military around this area. Going through here, the next town along, Carreg Castle. We'd started to look at the map at this point. We thought we knew where we were going, but we weren't 100% sure, and I decided, in my wisdom, to bring up the sat-nav. Now, I don't know about anyone else, but our sat-nav has this annoying habit of deciding to send us down the most bizarre back roads to get places. I don't know if it's just trying to go as the crow flies, so it takes any road in that direction. I don't know if it's picking any road in that points to the direction you want to go, but it, no matter what, picks the most bizarre routes, and I've tried every setting on it. We've actually generally don't use it. We tend to use the OS map, and unfortunately I'd left that in the other car, which was my mistake there. I should have remembered what the sat-nav was like and brought it with us. So we're going to be going on a bit of a magical mystery tour here. These are roads that I wouldn't suggest you take to get to this castle. It's a little bit wild and you'll see a little bit overgrown in places, and it's single track road for an awful lot of the journey. So you'll see in a moment that we're coming into Castle now. You'll see where we turn. Don't turn there, carry on straight, stay on the A40 until you get through Llandilio, and then you'll be able to come back through. You'll be able to cut through without going down this bizarre backwards road. What it does do is show you what the back roads in this part of Wales are like, and the fact that when you can be completely in the middle of nowhere and have absolutely no clue where you're going. So always be aware. Don't rely on a sat nav. If it proves nothing, that's what this proves. Don't ever rely on your sat nav to get you from A to B in the most direct route. as you can see, we've been going along these back lanes a fair bit. I've cut out an awful lot of the back lanes here. They were quite very much the same. You've got a hedge either side and a very narrow lane to go down, so there wasn't an awful lot to see. But we're now coming in towards Carmarthenshire and out onto the common land, I suppose, there. And you can see just how bleak it gets up there. There's nothing, you can't see another human being for miles at times, other than the walking groups, obviously, that are up there parked up. And it's the sheep that own this land. The sheep are everywhere across here, and you can see them darting across, so just be aware of that if you ever do go this way. And in a lot of places in Wales, always watch out for the wildlife, and we'll see a bit more wildlife further on. Now I've got to correct myself. Apparently it's pronounced Llandilo, not Llandilio. I'm English, you all know that. My pronunciation of a lot of words can be a bit strange, but I try my best, and I have tried to learn Welsh, and I know a little bit. So don't judge me too harshly for mispronouncing town names. I do it with English town names as well, don't worry, it's just the way that I am. I say words as I read them, and that doesn't always come out the correct way to pronounce them. So I've corrected myself now, Llandilo, not Llandilio, and I'll try not to do it again. And coming up here is exactly why you have to watch out for the sheep. Not that one, that's obviously a cyclist. They are here all the time, obviously, and you're on their land, and they're a wild animal. They're going to dart across in front of you, and they are going to try and get out of the way when they hear a large vehicle coming. So as you can see, this one, he made his run there. If you'd been going any quicker, that wouldn't have been a good situation, so you always have to be aware of the livestock when you come through these kind of places. So coming through here, we could see quite a lot of birds of prey flying around, and then realise that this building just up ahead is actually a red kite feeding centre. So obviously they put in protections to help bring the red kites back from the brink of extinction, and that was one of the feeding centres, so hence all the birds flying around there. And they're quite imposing. The size of them is quite imposing. You don't quite realise these birds of prey. Well, you certainly don't when you've not seen very many of them. I'm sure people who live in these areas see them all the time, and it becomes second nature. But the sheer wingspan of those birds and the force that they must have is quite phenomenal to see. So just wanted to point out the feeding centre there, that I believe they obviously do days out for people to be able to go and feed the birds or see how it works, and the work that they do to help keep their population numbers up. Now we're just coming up to another junction here, and it looks like we're going back onto a main road, which is great. The problem is that the sat-nav again sent us off fairly soon after this onto a small road again, and the biggest problem I had is that the maps that I had access to obviously has no very limited Wi-Fi connection, internet connection, 3G connection, 4G connection, whatever G connection it is, very limited connection there, so I couldn't even download the proper OS maps, which is what I would normally do here, to look at it. So we had to kind of, at this point we don't know where we are, so the only option we have is to keep following the sat nav and keep hoping that it's going to bring us to the correct place. So after the brief stint on what looked like a slightly bigger road, at least it had two lanes, one either side, two-way traffic as opposed to narrow one-lane traffic, we actually turned off and ended up in yet another small lane again, as you'll see in a moment. I mean, it is a beautiful area. The car did brilliantly, and you can see here obviously there are bits where you've got to change down gears and get up those hills, and it takes a little bit longer than it might in a modern car. But of all the challenges that car faced yesterday, it didn't miss a beat on any of those things. It just kept going, and for a 50-year-old car to do that without too much complaint, I mean, that's fantastic. That's exactly what we wanted from this car. So at this point we're sat there thinking these lanes are getting narrow again now. You start wondering if you are actually being led on a wild goose chase. See, seems to be more greenery growing in the middle of the road as opposed to at the sides of it, and that seems to be getting worse. there were a few times that we were sat there thinking, are we going to have to turn around and just follow everything that we did all the way back? As I say, these things happen. We all get lost sometimes. We know that we shouldn't trust that sat-nav. We've had this problem before. We ended up in the middle of a field of sheep once, and that was Bethlehem, by the way. We've just pulled into Bethlehem, so if you really went off route here. But as Avid would always say, well, Jesus was a Welshman, so it's quite clear that Bethlehem would be in Wales. Where else would it be? Joking aside, though, we're back on yet another country lane here. You can see the middle of the road, the grass growing, and actually some of that grass was hitting, you could hear it hitting the bottom of the car. That's how tall it was in places. This wasn't a nice road, and it's not one that we would ever suggest anyone takes for fun. I'm sure on one of your adventure bikes it would be great. The green laning, as they call it. We're not far off a green lane here, I don't think, so I'm sure on those kind of bikes it would be great, but for a nice country drive with your classic car, probably not the route to choose. mean, these lanes seem to be going on forever at this point. You can see there's more, they're more and more dense, the grass in the middle of it. Some of these turns, they're incredibly tight bends, and then very steep ascents afterwards that you've then got to try and get the speed back up after having to slow right down. The car did fantastically. Now, just round the corner here, I don't know how well it's come out on the video. We came round here and we saw a magnificent sight. There were two fallow deers stood just there. I don't know if you see them, they just run off to the side there. We were obviously a bit further away. You could quite clearly see the spots on the back of the deer when we were driving past. They beautiful sight to see, absolutely wonderful. I mean, the fallow deer is one of the more common species in the UK, but not something you see every day driving along. And then we went down round the corner a touch further, and we encountered a bird of prey or an owl or something like that, very big bird, and you'll see it again in a moment. Just coming in now to the shot. There he is. Sights we wouldn't have seen had we taken the A40 and carried on that way. The nature here is absolutely wonderful. I'm sure there are far more creatures than just those there, but what an amazing sight to see when you're out and about with two fallow deer. They looked straight up at us, then darted into the field, and the bird of prey swooping down like that and across into the tree. Really special sight to see. And as annoyed as we were at the sat-nav taking us this bizarre route that we were going, it was lovely to see that bit of nature again. And you know, who knows, all the different schemes that are going on to try and keep nature protected in this country. Hopefully we'll start to see more of that, because I'm sure they once roamed all over this land. So lovely to see that was. Now, we'd pulled in at this moment just to try and figure out where we were, just to have a 5-minute breather, just to figure out what to do next. It gets a bit hot in the car. Obviously there's no air conditioning, so it gets a bit hot in there. We had the dog in the back, poor thing. She was so well behaved, but not an ideal situation. And the sheep were really interested in us. Obviously they thought we were bringing them some dinner, so we're now carrying on round the country lanes, as you can see, yet more single track lane. It was a part of the day yesterday was single track lanes. Yeah, not a route to do. And I think if you squint really hard in the distance when you come around this corner, I think that's where you see the castle. Certainly when we were actually driving it, it was much clearer and it was much more prominent. We could see it quite clearly. It just appeared out of nowhere on top of the rock, and then the various trees and things got in the way, so you couldn't see it again. But I think if you squint really hard just over in that direction, you can see the castle there up on the hill, and that's where we're headed. And at this point we were being told we're 1.1 miles away from it. And I'm looking at where it is, and I'm looking at where we are. I'm thinking, is that only a mile? That looks a lot further than a mile, and it took us certainly a lot longer than I would expect a mile to take us to get there. But at least we could see it now. At least we knew we were on the right track and we were headed somewhere now. now finally we're on the approach to the castle. You can see it up there on the hill. So Carreg Cennen Castle, they think it was built around the 13th century, but they've also found Roman coins there, and various other bits and pieces that suggest it was actually older than that. It's built on the top of a block of limestone, and they say 1197 they believe Lord Rees may have constructed the first castle there, but the current castle which you see there was likely to be to have been built by John Gifford and his son in the 1300s. The castle was taken back and forward between the Welsh and the English. Owain Glyndwr led the Welsh revolt there, and he unsuccessfully besieged it. It was taken back, and then during the War of the Roses it was surrendered to the Yorkists, and was then destroyed and slighted in 1462 so that it couldn't be used again. And you can certainly see the dramatic effect of that. So we're now pulling into the car park there. It's quite a small car park, but we thought, we'd thought that there might be an opportunity to stop and have a cup of tea, have a wander around the grounds. We had the dog with us, so we weren't necessarily going to go into the castle, as I don't believe you can take dogs into the castle, but the grounds certainly we could have had a walk around. But as you can see, the car park was absolutely chock-a-block full of people. Obviously everyone had the same idea. I mean, it's a Saturday, we don't usually tend to go and do these things on a Saturday, but we decided we would this time, and we remember why we don't now. There were several spots that looked like there might be spaces, but they just seemed to be where people had parked really badly. They weren't big enough to pull the car in, and the Citroen Ami is quite narrow, so we should have been, we'd have been alright, but they were just the way the people had parked, leaving lots of room to open their doors, no doubt, so they don't hit other cars, which I get, but it meant that we couldn't, there was no room to stop there. So unfortunately, we drove all this way, and we had to pull straight back out again and pull up in the lay-by up the road. We had a cup of tea there, took some pictures from that angle, but a little bit disappointing. I know that you don't want lots of land taken up with car park spaces and things like that, but I think maybe people should just be perhaps a little bit more considerate when they're parking, so that you might get a few more cars in there. There we go. That's the nature of these things. You often find that the spots that have become popular on Instagram or social media tend to get lots of people, and it is quite an imposing castle, so I don't blame people for wanting to see it, and it's great they want to see the history. It was just a disappointment that we couldn't stop and explore it and get a few more shots from around the castle, but nevertheless we got to test drive the Ami after she'd been in and fixed, and good to see that she was coping on pretty much any terrain. So we pulled in here for a cup of tea, and then we decided we'd try and take the quicker route back. So we headed straight from here to Llandilo onto the A40, and should have been straightforward, straight back to Abergavenny, pull in the supermarket and get something to eat from there, because we hadn't at this point eaten. We'd been on the goes for quite a long time, and then head home. It should have been another hour and a half and back home. As I mentioned earlier, what actually happened was we pulled in, as expected, in Abergavenny. We pulled out onto the A465 and the junction to the A40 roundabout, with the Hardwick roundabout they call it. And there were only 4 or 5 cars in front of us queuing up to the roundabout, but there was a lot of smoke, and it seemed a Range Rover had caught fire on the roundabout. So obviously the police were there directing traffic, fire service were there trying to put the fire out, obviously, and the queue was just not moving. It was absolutely stationary. Now we're in an air-cooled vehicle, and an old vehicle at that, and we were a bit worried about overheating, so we then took a road off, and we thought we'll skip round the other side of Abergavenny. There must be a way through, we thought, and we ended up basically circling the Black Mountain, ending up in Hay-on-Wye, got some fuel, because by this point we were running low on fuel as well, headed back down, very nearly ended up straight back where we'd already been, Onto the A40, came through and cut off from Abergavenny just before Abergavenny, back down towards home. But ultimately, that ended up adding 3 hours to our journey. And this is part of the problem if you're in Wales. If you take a wrong turn, it might not just be a quick 10-minute detour, it might end up being a 3-hour detour. If a road gets closed, that's it, you're stuck. You have to take this huge diversion, and I know a lot of people found this when they were doing the roadworks on the A465. Some of the diversions that were in place sent you off a good couple of hours out of your way just to get back to where you wanted to go. So it's always worth making sure you check these things before you go out anywhere. You can't account for things like a vehicle fire. That was the problem yesterday. We couldn't have ever guessed that would happen, otherwise you'd go a completely different route. It was just unfortunate. That's where we ended up, and that's the route we had to take. So there was no other way around, and it was the right choice. We couldn't have sat there with the car overheating, and that would have been another vehicle fire if we hadn't moved off. So it was the right choice to do, but it's just an unfortunate series of events there. What we can say though is that car was tested to an inch of its life. It tried every terrain, every type of driving, just about. I think we didn't do motorways, but then I wouldn't want to do motorways in the Citroen Ami. But we did hills, green lanes, dual carriageways, single carriageways, hills, flats, rough road surfaces, wet road surfaces, gravel, you name it, we did it. So I'll let Avid do a video. He wants to do a video about driving because he was driving the Ami, and he's gonna explain, what it was like. But I think it's safe to say that car, as old as it is, handled it pretty well. Okay, may not have been as comfortable as your Range Rover, but hey, the Range Rover was on fire, so we didn't do too badly there. I'm going to stop waffling now because that's what I'm doing here. So we've not got much more of the journey left. We're now coming onto the A438, I think it is, and then into Llandylio, and you'll see the nice brightly coloured houses there. And I'll talk a bit more about them when we get there. And we're now coming up to Llandylio, and I pointed out the brightly coloured houses. It's lovely to see these, I have to say. Living in the valleys at the moment, there seems to be a bit of a trend for painting your house grey. I get they think it looks smart, but we get a lot of cloud around here. It's grey a lot of the year. It really lifts the spirits to see these brightly coloured houses, and they look pretty smart to me. I suppose they're not everyone's cup of tea, but to me, the bright colours coming through here are, they look nice. It attracts the eye. People think, oh, that's a nice little village. Whether it is or not, who knows? But let's stop with the grey, eh? That's my view anyway. Avid's told me I've got to correct myself as well. The car wouldn't have caught fire, he says. I'm just being over dramatic. Because the other car was on fire, I'm just being over dramatic. It was getting very hot in there. I know it wasn't anywhere near to catching fire, and I know if we'd sat in the traffic, we'd have turned the engine off. But, let's add a bit of drama to it today. So now we are really at the end of the journey. That was a Tesla speeding past. We were trying, this car's turning in, so we were all trying to get past, but he decided that he was more important than anyone else. There we are. The camera there ran out of battery at this point. It'd been a very long day. Doris, our dog, was in the back, and she's famous. She's got several books out, If you want to take a look, they're on Amazon. That's a careless plug there, I know. she was ever so well behaved. That dog means the world to me, so calling her the dog is just my way of of explaining who was there. It was a really hot day, and the poor thing, we would never normally take her out if it was going to get to that kind of heat, but we didn't expect it to go the way that it did. Yeah, so this is the end of the journey. We're on the A40 here. As I say, this isn't the end of what we dealt with during that day. It's just where the camera ran out of battery, so that's the castle there, up on the hill from the lay-by where we stopped. A lovely shot, to be fair. I mean, those people that were walking up to it, they wouldn't have got these shots necessarily, so we're lucky on that in that respect. There's the Citroen Ami with me and Doris in it. You can see her sticking her little head up there. And it was a good day. As hard as it was, and it was a really long day, the car did wonderfully, so that's a great thing, and it's lovely to keep an old car like that on the road. So I'm going to finish this off here. If you enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up, subscribe. It makes me more encouraged to do more if we have more subscribers and people watching it. Avid's got another Himalayan video to put up as well this week, so make sure you keep an eye out for that and take a look at that. And let us know which videos you're liking. Yeah, that's it for today. Bye for now.